the Egyptian pictograms were known as hieroglyphics. Okay, the word hiero in Greek means sacred, right? And the word glyph meant carving, right? So they believed that the hieroglyphics were sacred carvings or the writing of the gods. That's what they believed that the hieroglyphics was. Gods communicated. That's what that means, sacred carvings, right? They are pictorial symbols that represent words, sounds, and concepts, okay? We have the same thing if you think about emojis. Emojis are pretty much hieroglyphics, and they're used in the same ways. And I'll show you how some of our emojis are used in the same ways, right? Hieroglyphics could be written and read from right to left and also from left to right, depending on the way that that it faced would tell you the way to read the sentence. So if you see the faces pointing this way, this is a sedge plant, but it's pointing this way, that means that you read it from this way. You start here and you read over there. If you see the faces pointing the opposite way, that means you read from this side and you start this way. So the way that the faces in the pictorial symbols were facing told you how to read the sentence. Now you can also find hieroglyphics that are written vertically, up and down. And a lot of times these are separated by thick, bold lines, and you start from the top and you read it to the bottom. So they can be written from left to right or right to left, and from top to bottom. Okay? And remember, hieroglyphics didn't have any vowels in them, but today we've translated the hieroglyphics to some of the English vowels just to make it easier for us to understand them. But the writing in itself, they never had vowels. They had certain sounds that were associated with the hieroglyphics, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay. Let's talk about some of the ways that these hieroglyphics are used. And determinatives. Determinatives. Okay. I always got a little slight lean. I need to work on that lean, man. Let me get that. Let me get it together, man. That's my trademark. I don't like that, but. Okay. Okay, we'll write like that. Now, so these are the forms of how the hieroglyphics were used, right? And again, I said the hieroglyphics are really similar to emojis. So let's talk about what is an ideogram form of a hieroglyphic. The ideogram represented a concept, right? So if you think about some of the emojis that we have that represent concepts and don't represent a word, they don't really represent the word. So the concept, you can use multiple words to describe it. It just gives a feeling of what it is. An example of this would be the heart, right? So when you see that, everybody understands what that is across cultures. You don't really need to know the language. You just look at the picture and get the feeling. The heart can represent love. It can be like, or it can literally mean heart, depending on how you're using it, right? Another concept of this might be maybe that's not a good one, because I think you might need to, there's not an ideogram there. What's another concept that is understood across cultures? Okay, bye. This is one that they actually use. Should be mouth. And when it was used in an ideogram, when they wanted you to think about it as an ideogram, they would put a slash here on the side of it or underneath it, depending on how it's written, right? This was the ideogram for mouth, right? So the mouth can mean mouth, it can mean lips, you know, it can mean a number of different things, but that picture was supposed to represent concepts that can be translated across cultures when you look at the picture, right? Logograms are something that you need to understand the language in order to interpret it, right? So a logogram represents a word. So for instance, if you don't know what this symbol means across cultures, that's called an ampersand in English. There's no way you're gonna know that unless you know English, right? Also, dollar sign. I know we think everybody knows what that means, but you know, not everybody is using dollars. Some people use yen, and there's other currencies. Think about all the currencies that you don't know the symbol for, right? You have to know the language in order to understand the logogram, right? So the logogram represents an actual word. Another one could be the at symbol, right? At, okay. Now, sometimes the hieroglyphs were used as phonograms, which represents a sound. So sometimes they want you to use it as, let's take at for example. At, if we're using it as a logogram, then that at is supposed to represent at. So at yahoo.com. I want you to understand that literally as the at symbol, right? If I'm using it as a phonogram, a sound, we're no longer using it for what it's really supposed to be used for. So now we write it like this. Bat, right? And we understand that means not at. That means swing something, right? Or they say don't be what? Don't be late, right? So that's, instead of it being the logogram for 8, it is the phonogram, you know? So sometimes the Egyptian symbols were used like that to represent a sound, where they have two meanings to it, right? And determinatives, they gave context to sentences, right? So for determinative, that's a mouthful, right? Think about it like this. If I give you the sentence, we close at 8 today, and I give an emoji like this. What's the one? I like the one where they go like this. It's just blowing that little thing. I don't know. You ever seen that party emoji where they're blowing the little rollout thing? You know, and it's got a little hat, a little birthday hat on. You know, if I say we close at 8 today, that's a happy sentence, doesn't it seem like, right? So the happy face at the end would be the determinative. But I can also say the same sentence, we close at 8 today, and give you this one. You know, the rolling eyes symbol, right? That kind of changes the meaning of it. Like, oh, it's no longer a happy thing. Now it's a bad thing. So the determinative lets you know what the sentence is about. So sometimes they use certain determinatives to kind of give context to how you should be reading the sentence. So these are the ways in which the hieroglyphs are used, okay? Also, now we talked about how one single hieroglyph can be used multiple ways, and the phonograms actually gave the writers a way to actually spell out different words, right? So the phonograms can be unilateral. I'll leave this up. You guys got this? Let me go erase it, okay? Or not unilateral, I apologize. Uniliteral. So the phonograms, whenever the hieroglyphs are used to represent a sound, they can be uniliteral, which translates to our consonants, like C, B, might be A. So one hieroglyph would represent K, B, the sound of the letter, K, B, H, right? Then biliteral, one hieroglyph would represent the sound of two letters, Ch, Sh, F, you know? So they would have one hieroglyph to represent the sound of two letters, right? And also triliteral, where it might be like the Ankh and Inter. So sometimes they had hieroglyphs that represent the sound of three letters put together, right? And using these hieroglyphs, they will put them together and make certain words, okay? Now let's go into something fun here. Let's have a little bit of fun here with this. Got that. Let's actually look at some hieroglyphs here. Okay. These are the actual hieroglyphs. So using these, you'll be able to spell your name, you can write things, you know. And they also have some of the logogrammic meanings with it too. All right, this A can be written certain ways. The arm, you can see an arm here, so you can write that to actually mean an arm, or you can write that to represent A, the sound A. This is a vulture here, also represents A, right? I would have spent all day if I had to draw this up here, so I took the time to write it. All right, B was represented by a leg here. You can see the leg. C, the sound K, was represented by a cup, also a cloth here. D, represented by a hand. E was represented by feathers, but this is the sound E, not really the right E. So you can write that, you can use that feather multiple different ways, and you'll see the same hieroglyphs being used multiple different ways for the same letter here. Sound F was represented by a viper. G was for a pot, represented by a pot here. H was represented by a wick. There's multiple letters for H, multiple hieroglyphs. I have none. I don't have any of the. I think I have one biliteral here, but they have other biliterals and triliterals that you can also look up. And I didn't have room to put the numbers, so we'll probably do the numbers another time. But I was also represented by a feather, just like E was, because they kind of have the same sound here. Right? J is represented by a cobra. K is represented by a cup, just like C. K, K, have the same sound. L is represented by a lion. M represented by an owl. Okay. N is represented by this pointy wiggly line here, which is water, supposed to represent water. So you can just write that out or spell it out. O is represented by this rope here, let's say. P is represented by a stool. Q is represented by a hill. K. R is represented by mouth, the mouth. S is represented by a cloth, just like the C was here. T represented by a loaf. U is represented by a chick. V is represented by a viper, just like the F was. W is represented by another chick, just like the U, W. X, cup and a rope, same as C. I mean, cup and cloth, rather. Y is represented by feathers, and this is also 2 slashes, the way that you can represent Y. You can also use the 2 slashes to represent E and I. So they all pretty much have the same pictogram for each of those sounds. Z is represented by a bolt, right? SH, the sound sh, is represented by a basin. It's supposed to be a basin. And this is the symbol for a man. This is the symbol that they would use for a woman. And this is the symbol that they would use for an aunt, right? So with these, you can probably look at some hieroglyphs and begin to start, putting them together and understanding certain things, whether they're talking about the specific thing, like you might see them put a man there, or whether they're spelling something out. You can start to read and realize, what am I actually looking at here when I see all these pictures? So now you can look at it with new eyes and get a new excitement with it. So I hope you guys take pictures of this so you'll have it. But let's do another, a quick little exercise. If you want to go ahead and take a picture of it. Introduction to hieroglyphs. And you can find this online as well. You can look up the Hieroglyphic Alphabet and go online, discover how to spell your name. So you might see, like in Egypt, people have the little hieroglyphic chains that actually spell out something that means something to them. So let's do a little exercise if you guys are done with this. Okay, bear with me while I get my draw on. This is what I found online. Don't kill me if they look terrible. More room, girl. Oh, I got you. Okay, hold on. Let's leave the back end open. Okay. Okay. So we're going to go through and we're going to read this. This is the actual Egyptian hieroglyph that was written out to spell a person's name. Okay. So let's go through how we actually read this and what this name is. Okay. Which way would we start? Do we know? Which way would we start reading? Raise your hand if you think we start from this side. Okay. Raise your hand if you think we start from this side. Okay, good job. Yeah, we start from this side because all the faces are pointing that way. That shows the way that we should start reading. Okay. So we start reading from this side, and we also start from the top bottom. So the direction is going to go like this, then like this, then like this, then like this, and like this, all the way down, right? Start from the top, going down all the way over, right? So that's how the direction is going to go. Now, I know I drew these things on the back, so I'm going to just translate them for you. This being 1, following this directional path, this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay? All the way up to 11, because we have 11 pictograms here. And each one of these are used in its the phonographic states, okay? So okay. 1, the hill. Told you represented the Q. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the hill represented the Q. 2, the lion represented the L. The feather represented the I, E sound, right? What did this one represent? Does anybody know? Can you remember? Can you see it on the pictures? O, you're right. What did this little box represent? P. Good job, P. You already know hieroglyphics. Look, it's crazy. What did this represent? The big bird. A. All right. The hand is what? D. Yeah. Sorry, I'm writing some lowercase and some uppercase. D. The mouth. R. R. Yeah. The bird again. Another A. And this one. T. T. Now, this here, I didn't tell you guys, sometimes they would just use a little participle to fill in a space because the writing that they did was more about, it was a very beautified language. A lot of it had to do with spirituality, which is symbolism, and they wanted things to be sacred and also symmetrical. So they used this little particle here to fill space. So this doesn't really mean anything here. The last 11 one didn't really mean anything. So I'm just going to write that. It's just there to fill up the space. But that, I just wrote it to stay true to how it actually looks, okay? So now let's put this together. We get, this is someone's name. Do you know what name that is? Huh? What name is it? Huh? Say it loud. I can't hear you. I gotta make sure you got it right.
Cleopatra. That's the Q sound.
No, the Q is pronounced like a K. It's like K. So what name you think it is? Have you ever heard the name before?
No.
You've
It's
never
like
heard that
similar
name
to
before.
Cleopatra.
What?
It's similar to Cleopatra.
That's right. That's what it is.
Okay.
This is Cleopatra's name.
Oh.
Cleopatra's name. That's how they spelled it out. But it uses the sounds to write it, but it doesn't necessarily line up because it's phonetic. You want to listen to it and see how it sounds, you know. So good job. You were able to read it and make that connection now. Now you can basically read hieroglyphics just a little bit, so you know what you're looking at. So congratulations. That concludes my class for today. You know, just an introduction.